Hey guys, Peter here from the Biochemistry Optical Core. Today I want to talk to you guys about optical configurations, specifically what they are, how to make one, and how they can be used in your experiment to make them more efficient and quicker. So first, what are optical configurations? Put simply, optical configurations are just imaging presets. They contain all of your imaging parameters within a single click of a button. So to find an optical configuration, you can just right-click, Acquisition Controls, and then this menu OC panel. So with this open, there's already a few optical configurations that I've made previously, and they're sorted into different groups that I've specified previously. So you can adjust all these parameters yourself. Other options here, you can make a new group. You can explore each one of these optical configurations, and of course you can make a new optical configuration. Additionally, you can make a new optical configuration by going to Calibration and going to New Optical Configuration. So all these options are the same down here as well. You can choose either one. Now, why exactly would you want to group your optical configurations? Your lab may have multiple members who are using the confocal or SIM or epifluorescent storm microscope, and you may not want to use someone else's settings or interfere with those settings that they've used previously. So you may decide that you may use, say, a group per lab member and then have all of their optical configurations for their experiments under that group. Additionally, you may do what I've kind of done here, where for the A1 confocal imaging, I'd have a set of presets or optical configurations versus just looking with the eye, so with epifluorescence on the confocal. So you can separate them that way. They're very good ways of organizing so that instead of having to sit down at your microscope computer and trying to figure out which settings would go best, or just trying to figure out how to visualize something with the confocal, instead of going through all the steps of making those settings, you can just click a button. So how do you make an optical configuration? Let's say, for instance, that I would really like to visualize nuclei. The first thing you're going to want to do, of course, is to tinker with your settings to find the settings that are best for your imaging experiment. If I'm happy with all of this, I can make a new optical configuration. To do that, like I said, you can either select it here, or you can go to Calibration, New Optical Configuration. I'm going to hit this, and this window that seems kind of confusing, but really isn't that confusing, pops up. First thing I can do is just give it a name. So I'm just going to call this my 405. Oh, it's called preset. You can call it whatever you want. And there's a number of things here that are already checked. Basically, this says, okay, all the camera settings, the scan area, and scan area position, save those too. For some people, they can come in to start their experiment and may notice that their scan area settings are a little wonky, and it may be because the person who previously came in adjusted these, and that optical configuration just saved over it. So it's up to you. You can have it automatically save this, or you can uncheck it. I just usually leave it checked because I don't typically mess with the scan area, but that's up to you. The channel setup. Again, this is one of these things where you can adjust the actual color and things like that, the name, all that. You can adjust those yourself too. And then the microscope setting, this has a number of different modules attached to it. For instance, you can specify the zoom to be 1. You can tell it to turn on or off your perfect focus system. A critical issue here is the light path. If you're doing confocal, you definitely want to make sure this is L100 because that shifts the direction of the light to the detectors. One thing you'll notice I don't have checked is the objective. And that's because too many times I've had this checked and it's selected for like 100x or something when I was originally doing the experiment. But then the next experiment I come in, I want the 20x, and I don't remember that my preset's saved. So whenever I select that preset or optical configuration, while it's initially on the 20x, it'll move to the 100x whenever I change to that preset. So I leave this unchecked, and I think you should too, unless you're very confident you're going to be using the same objective over and over and over again. Finish here, and you'll see it makes a new preset. So if I were to say select a 488 laser test, that is another optical configuration that selects only my green laser. I'll show you what happens if I go back to 405. It'll move all of my settings to now reflect what was saved before. So you can see how this is very good for being efficient with your time, so you don't have to say, well, what gain did I use last time, or what power was I using, what pinhole. All those settings are saved under the optical configuration. One way of actually using them is to basically put them all into an experiment. Elements has this full GUI system where you can set up all sorts of imaging parameters for an imaging experiment, and those are located under this ND acquisition. So I'm just going to select this. One of these windows will pop up. Up here is you can dictate which type of experiment you want to do. You can do a time lapse, you can do an XY, you can do a Z series, and wavelength is what I'm going to be focusing on today. So I'm going to uncheck Z actually. And right now there are no wavelengths selected. And you can see that you can only set up this experiment if you have optical configurations to populate your wavelengths. And so what this will do is it'll take images using the settings you specified in your optical configurations and take images and save that under an ND2 file. To populate this, you can just select this checkbox here, and I'm going to populate it with my 405 preset I just made, as well as my 488, and I'll do my 561 as well. With all that ready to go, I'm happy with the path, I'm happy with the file name, I think I'm ready to go. So how to do this, you can just click Run Now when you're sufficiently happy with this. And when it's running the experiment, it's going to take an image, like I said, with each one of my optical configurations, and it'll automatically switch to those for me. A quick caveat before I finish off this video today. One huge issue that many users experience when they're working with optical configurations is their settings constantly get saved over without them knowing. And what ends up happening is one day you've figured out the settings you want. The next day you come in to do an imaging experiment, you're fiddling around with your settings again. And then when you run your experiment, you notice that it's running the experiment with all these new settings that you've given it because it's automatically saving over your optical configuration. If you don't want it to do that, which in general I would say is a wise course of action, you can go to Edit, Options, and make sure none of these are selected, and this is set to Keep Selected. And what that means is that if I hit OK, I adjust any one of these parameters, say this one, this is 50. There's a red exclamation mark that appears next to my optical configuration. And that's prompting you to assign that new setting. And I believe this is the best way to go about working with optical configurations, where it prompts you every single time you make a change, so you can ask yourself and confirm that that's actually the setting you want to use for your optical configuration. I think this will reduce a lot of headaches most users have when working with these guys. I think that about does it for this video. I hope that this has been a good explanation of optical configurations. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, let me know. But I'll see you next time. Thanks.